Hey guys, welcome to section 6, chapter 9 of the pre-algebra program. And in this section, we are going to learn two new formulas. One is called the distance formula, and the other is the midpoint formula. So we're going to take 2 days over this section. And the first day, you're going to work on the distance, and the second day, you're going to work on the midpoint. Neither one is too difficult, but I just want to get you familiar with the notation and what everything means. So we're going to jump right in here. All right, pause the video and write down these formulas. And then once you have them, let's proceed. Okay, so for our first example, we want to find the distance between 2 points. So our first point is -1, 3. And our second point is 8, -6. All right, and so for our formula purposes, I want to identify what each value is. So remember that all of our points are written in x, y form. So for my first point, it's going to be x1, y1. And in my second point, it's going to be x2, y2. All right, and once you have those identified, and if you recall, we actually did this when we were finding slope a couple of chapters ago, then it helps you to just plug in appropriately. So you'll see why we needed to practice using squares and square roots before we were able to learn this. But now that we know how to do the squares and the square roots, we can go ahead and apply. So the distance between these points is going to be x2, which is 8, minus x1, which is -1. We're going to square that value, and then we're going to add y2, which is -6, minus y1, which is -3, and we're going to square that. All right, now be careful. Remember, we've been talking about throughout the course that anytime we make a replacement, we need to make sure we put it in parentheses, and that's really important here. Pay very close attention to your signs. So notice that I have a negative here because that's what we needed in the formula, and then I have -1 here in parentheses because that is what we needed for the x1 point. However, we learned that two negatives together make a positive. So be mindful of those negatives. So really, I have the value 8 plus 1 here, comma squared. And then plus the value, -6 take away 3 is -9, quantity squared. All right, and now we just have some simple addition. 8 plus 1 is 9 squared, plus -9 squared. So remember, in dealing with our squares, it's 9 times 9 for this one, which is 81. And this one is -9 times a -9. I'll move that up so you can see it a little better, which is also 81. All right, and then we're going to add those two things together, and we're going to get the square root of 62. And when you punch that into your calculator, remember you're going to take the square root sign, type in 162, and then around to the nearest tenth, you should get 12.7. All right, so there's your first example. Let's go ahead and do another one. Again, we're going to take the distance between the point 4, -2, and then we're going to take the distance between -6 and -7. So again, to help you with these formulas, I would encourage you to write them over and over again. So this one is x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. The more you write it, the more you're going to remember it. So there's a lot of research that tells us that writing information spurs particular cognitive processes. Did you like all of that? So that's a really fancy way of saying your brain works harder when you write things down, and it makes you smarter. So write. Don't cheat. Don't just watch me. Go ahead and do it. Okay, so again, I want to identify which number goes with which letter. So this is my x1, my y1, my x2, and my y2. And that helps me plug in appropriately. So then I just have to pull -6 minus 4, quantity squared, plus, and then y2 is -7 minus, again, watch those negatives, -2. So get that guy in parentheses here because notice we're going to have two negatives together we got to take care of. All right, so now let's clean this up a little bit. -6 take away 4 is going to give me -10 underneath there, quantity squared. And then I'm going to get -7 plus 2 quantity squared. All right, so that's going to give me a -10 squared plus -5 quantity squared. All right, I'm going to keep working that down, and I'm going to get 100 because -10 times -10 is going to give 100. And -5 times -5 is going to give me 25, which is going to give me the square root of 125. And when you plug in the square root of 125, you're going to get 11.2 to the nearest tenth there. All right, I'm going to do one more example for you, just to make sure that you guys really got this. And then there's 1 or 2 examples in the book too, so hopefully that'll be good enough. It's just about identifying your pieces and then plugging them in appropriately and then making sure that we do the appropriate operations. So get that brain working and write your distance formula again. Minus y1 quantity squared. And then remember, this is x1 comma y1 because that's our first point, x2 comma y2 because that's my second point. And then we're ready to plug in appropriately. So x2 is 0, take away 2 quantity squared, plus -3 minus 2 quantity squared. This one I didn't give you any extra negatives, so you're welcome. It's good practice. 0 take away 2 is -2 quantity squared. -3 take away -2, or take away 2 is -5 quantity squared. All right, -2 times -2 is going to give me a 4. And then -5 times -5 is going to give me 25. Add those together and you get the square root of 29. And if you plug that into your calculator and round to the nearest tenth, you should get 5.4. All right, just another thing to note here. If you are getting a negative underneath the radical sign, warning, warning, warning. We can never have a negative underneath that radical or the square root sign, right? So it should always be positive. Hence the reason why we have these squares here. Those squares are going to ensure that we always get a positive. So, but if you start working your computations and all of a sudden, you're getting a negative, then you've definitely done something wrong. So we need to go back and fix that up. Okay, that was actually the harder, I would say, of the 2 formulas. So let's go ahead and move on to midpoint. And the midpoint, again, like it says, helps us to find the middle of a line. So, if we have a line A here and we have a point B there, and we want to find halfway between point C, this is the midpoint formula that's going to allow us to do that. So that's what we're finding. Whereas the distance allowed us to find the distance between A and B, the midpoint helps us to find the middle. Okay, so we're finding the middle and the distance. All right, so our midpoint formula is simply add our x's, divide by 2, add our y's, and divide by 2, and voila. So it's really Really not bad. So let's say we had the point 4, 1 and negative 2, 5. And I wanted to find the midpoint between them. Well, we could graph them, sure. We could try to count it out that way. But I think probably the quickest way, unless you're actually looking at the graph, is to use this formula. So again, we need to identify that this is x1, y1, and this is x2, y2. And then I'm going to grab those x's, 4 plus a negative 2, and I'm going to divide that by 2. Then I'm going to grab my y's, 1 plus 5 divided by 2. And then I'm just going to clean that up. So when I add a negative, I'm going to end up subtracting that 2. So 4 take away 2 is 2 divided by 2. 1 plus 5 is 6 divided by 2. And then 2 divided by 2, 2 is 1, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. And this is the midpoint between those points A and B. Okay, I'm going to do just one more of these because I really think that you guys are super smart and I've taught you much harder things this year than that. So this should be pretty good, I think. So let's say we have the point 3, negative 6. And we also have the point 1, negative 4, and we want to find the midpoint between those two. I identify my x1, y1, and my x2, y2. All right, and I'm going to add 3 plus 1 divided by 2. Those are my x's. Grab those x's. And then grab the y's. You have negative 6 plus negative 4 all over 2. And then I'm going to add the top. I'm going to get 4 divided by 2. And then again, we have a positive and a negative, which is a negative. So negative 6 take away 4 is going to be negative 10 over 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. Here is the midpoint between those 2 points. All right, y'all, that's all we have for this section. And after this, we have just one more new section for this course. So it's super exciting. Go ahead and finish up your notes, read through the examples, and begin your assignment.